So today we're diving into a case where there are two completely different stories. On one side, you've got an official ruling of suicide, and on the other, a family's relentless fight for answers, a fight that's fueled by a mountain of questions. This is the story of U.S. Army veteran Donte Perez Jones. Okay, let's get into it. This one statement, something Dante actually said to his mother, it's really the core of this whole thing. It's why his family, from day one, just felt something was off. And it's the conviction that's still driving their search for what they believe is the truth. Yeah, that quote really gives you a sense of a man who loved life, right? So before we get into the grim details of his death, let's take a moment to understand who Donte Perez Jones actually was as a person. From everything we know, Dante was a guy who was actively building his future. He was a 35-year-old vet, a dad to 3 kids, he had a job at Piedmont Airlines, and was even studying to get his commercial driver's license. His family just describes him as healthy, upbeat, a man with plans. So you can see why the official story just didn't sit right with them. Not at all. Okay, so what is the official story here? Let's walk through the timeline that law enforcement put together, the one that really shaped the initial narrative. All right, so it all starts late on the night of June 16th when Dante is last seen at his mom's house. The very next morning, his body is found in a park almost an hour's drive away. But get this, just a little over 2 hours after they find his body, the park is totally cleared out and reopened for some public event. And then it takes a full 4 days for the police to even release an official statement. Now, it's also important to understand the context here, because it probably played a role in the official thinking. There's this tragic statistic, a really staggering one, that says about 22 U.S. veterans die by suicide every single day. And that's a number that authorities, they have to consider when they're investigating the death of any veteran. And that context seems to have led right to this conclusion. The Whitpain Township Police put out a public statement, and it was pretty clear. They said no foul play was suspected and that Dante's death appears to be a suicide. And they made this public just 4 days after he was found. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn, because as soon as that official narrative came out, a completely different one started to take shape, one driven by Dante's family and, well, a whole lot of troubling inconsistencies. And you can really see the clash right here. On one hand, you have the official finding of suicide, but on the other, you have all these nagging questions, like, how can it be a hanging if his feet are flat on the ground? What about the bruises? And hey, if there was no foul play, where's his wallet? Why was there no note? And that first question is the one that the family just can't get past. I mean, think about it. Dante was a tall guy, 6'5", and according to his family and witnesses, when he was found, his feet were flat on the ground. His flip-flops were still on. To them, the physics of it all just doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't stop there. The questions just keep piling up. Besides the way he was found, his family said they saw a bunch of bruises on his neck, his arms, his shoulders, bruises they worried might have been from a struggle. Then there's the fact that his wallet was gone, vanished, never recovered. And like we said, no suicide note, nothing to explain what happened. So the family's focus starts to shift. It's not just about the physical evidence anymore. It's about the investigation itself. To them, how quickly the whole thing was wrapped up felt like a huge red flag. And when you look at what they're pointing to, you can see why. Okay, so first they claimed the police told them the case was closed the very same day the body was found, day 1. We already talked about how the scene was cleared in about 2 hours. But get this. They weren't even allowed to see or identify their own son's body for over 48 hours. And the coroner? At first, they refused to even do an autopsy. They only changed their mind after a lot of public pressure. And the cherry on top? Police leaders said the only surveillance camera that pointed to that spot, well, it just so happened to not be recording. All of this just makes you wonder, what's supposed to happen in a death investigation? I mean, are there rules for this kind of thing? And the answer is a big yes. The U.S. Department of Justice actually publishes national guidelines for this stuff. They're meant to create a standard, a playbook for how law enforcement should handle these investigations all over the country. And when you look at these guidelines, they're all about the fundamentals. It's things like photograph the scene, write down everything, figure out where the injuries happened, and of course, collect and protect all the evidence. Basic stuff that takes time and care, which is a pretty stark contrast to clearing the whole area and reopening a park in just a couple of hours.
And there's this key principle in the DOJ guidelines that documenting the scene creates a permanent historical record. So the family and their supporters, their argument is simple. By rushing and clearing that scene, the authorities basically failed to create that record. And who knows what crucial evidence might have been lost for good.
So that brings us to today. And honestly, the case is kind of stuck. You still have this massive conflict between the official story and the family's questions, and it's just completely unresolved. And this might be the most unbelievable part of the whole story. It's been 3 years since Donte died. And the official autopsy report, it has still not been made public. That lack of transparency has just made the family's suspicions grow even stronger. But even with that official silence, Dante's family has absolutely refused to back down. They've started a GoFundMe, hired their own private medical examiner to do an independent autopsy, they organize vigils, they've kept the #JusticeForDonte hashtag going online. They are still demanding answers and accountability from the officials in Whitpain Township. So, where does that leave us? This whole case, it really shines a light on a very difficult, painful situation. When you have the official findings on one side and a family's own evidence on the other, and they're worlds apart, what does it actually take to find the truth? How do you bridge that gap and get to what really happened?